How do consultants build presentations? In this video, I will walk you through a real BCG presentation and explain the concepts that they use to build a great slide deck. Hi everyone, my name is Johannes. I'm a strategy consultant, and on this channel I share my thoughts, learnings and experiences about consulting, business and mindset. If you're new to this channel, then please make sure to subscribe to it and also leave a thumb up. This will help to grow the channel and will help you that you don't miss any new video. And today I want to try something new. Today I will walk you through a real BCG presentation. This presentation is available online for everyone, so this is not any kind of confidential information, and I will walk through some of the slides. I made a pre-selection up front, and we'll talk a little bit about the concepts and methods that they use in order to build great presentations in management consulting. So I would say let's start directly. So this is basically a study. It's called Mind the AI Gap, Leadership Makes the Difference, and it's published in 2018. So it's like 4 years old, so quite old to be honest. Nevertheless, I think they use a kind of modern design already, so that's why I chose this one. And I think, it illustrates a lot of the concepts that you use in management consulting to build presentations. So I would say let's directly jump into it. So they start with the results at a glance. And this is what we would typically refer to as a executive summary. And a executive summary in management consulting is basically a summary that summarizes all of the main findings of your presentation. And typically, as you see, this is usually a slide that is completely in a very simple bullet point format. Sometimes maybe you highlight important taglines as it is here in green, but usually those executive summaries are very, very plain. And the reason why you use executive summaries is that the management, if they don't have a lot of time, or if you start a presentation, can just quickly read through it and have a very good understanding about the content, and they don't need to attend the entire meeting. So this makes work in top management much more efficient. And this is what you have typically in every larger consulting presentation. You wouldn't have that if you only would have like 5 slides in an operational meeting or so. But if you have an official meeting with some important stakeholders, if you have a longer slide deck, then you would typically use an executive summary. And the executive summary is usually a very, very good illustration of the so-called top-down communication principle. Because this is also something that you have probably already heard of, and is something that you very often use in consulting. It's the top-down communication principle. This means that you start with the key message first, and that you then only break it down into the single arguments. And again, this makes communication much more efficient. And this is kind of different as what you probably learned in university, because there you usually start with the analysis, and at the end of your paper, you come with the conclusion. In consulting, it's directly the other way around. You start with the key message and then you lay out the argumentation. And again, the main reason is time is very precious in top management. So you tell them all the content up front, and then they decide if they stay or not. And also it gives the audience a much better structure, because they already know the main findings. They can focus on certain things, and this will also help to clear the message and to make listen to your presentation much more easy. With that being said, that's the executive summary here. They start with the results of their study, and that's a typical slide. Then the next slide that they have in the deck is the following. And I think, this is a perfect example of how a consulting slide is structured, because it contains, most of the important elements that you see in every consulting slide. So first of all, they have the action title. And the action title is typically a title, as you see here, which is on the top of the slide, that summarizes the key message of the slide in one very clear sentence. And here it says, French companies are lagging behind in leveraging AI. So a very simple message. It's a very short action title. Typically you use 2 rows. That's what you see most of the time. But here you use a short action title, which is totally fine, because it still summarizes the key message. Also, what makes the slide look very, very clean and very, very organized is that they think in thirds. And this is also a very important concept if you want to build slides. And this principle means that you think your slides in thirds, which means that if you structure your slide, that you always try to divide your slide in thirds. And this is what you see here, because the chart is on the two first thirds. Okay, so 1/3 is here on the left side, then the other one is in the middle, and then the third third, so the one on the right, there is the text. And the line which is exactly between the second third and the third third makes it visually very compelling, because for us it looks very, very structured, very, very clean. And this is also something that I recommend, is that you always try to structure your slide in thirds or in quarters. This is also possible that you have one half on the other side, on one side, one half on the other, or that you think in quarters. This is also possible. Then another thing that is typical for management consulting presentations is that you have a legend for your graph. It's here right in the middle of the graph. Typically I would try to have it somewhere in the bottom, because this looks much more cleaner if you do it that way. But here they decided to put it above the graph. It's totally fine. But this is basically the color code that explains what your colors mean in a chart. And this is something that people sometimes forget. I highly recommend to always double check if this is included. And this is a legend, so a very typical item what you have on consulting presentations if you show graphs. And of course, you cannot forget the footnotes. So there is one footnote here, number 1. I don't see where it refers to. Yeah, here on the right side, it's references to China. And then they see for additional data, see reports. So this is also something that you do, because very often in consulting, you want to show a lot of information. It would make the graph way too busy if you would include all the information in the main text. That's why you use footnotes. So if you want to include maybe additional data, maybe a reference to the source, and maybe some comments, then it's a very elegant way to just use a footnote and include it on the bottom of the slide. But be cautious, don't overdo footnotes, because this also can look too busy if there are, like 5, 6, 7 footnotes on the bottom of the slide. But those are some elements that you typically use in consulting, and those are some elements which make this slide look very, very clean. So in my opinion, it's a very good slide. I really like it. So the density of the content is almost perfect in my opinion. So I really like the slide. Let's take a look at the next slide. And here you see a data table. And I think that this is again a very good illustration on how to present a lot of data and a lot of numbers in a very compelling way. Because basically what they show is a table, it's a matrix. So it's the countries and the cluster on the other axis. And this is a typical table. And normally, if you would just, include the table without any color coding, it would make it very, very hard for your audience to understand what you want to show. But what they do here is that they use some colors in order to highlight the high percentages and the low ones. What I really, really like is that those colors are kind of decent, so they are not very aggressive. So they look kind of very clean, very neat, and help to visualize the main message. And this is exactly how you in consulting should use those colors. Okay, so don't make the mistake to use too much colors, to use too many distracting colors in a graph that don't have any kind of meaning. If you use colors, then it really should help to support the key message. It should help to transport information. It shouldn't be just there to, to visualize something. If you use colors, it's very important that they support the message. And this is something, in my opinion, that they do in a really good way here. So the slide, again, despite being a table with a lot of numbers, looks very, very clean. Then if we take a look at the next slide, then we see that again, they show a lot of data. And I'm not too happy with that slide, to be honest. There are several things that I don't really like. But let's first maybe start with a structural concept. So what they do again is that they think in thirds, and this is exactly what I talked about a couple of minutes ago. So one third are here the three graphs on the left, then the other third is here in the middle, then the right third is the text, the comments. And also in this left section here, they apply a principle that is called think in tables. And this means that every chart is also a table. So if you decide to choose a 2/3 and 1/3 logic, what they do is that they divide the 2/3 into a table format. And so they have like rows and columns, and it's very, very clean. It's very, very structured. This makes it very, very easy to understand. And this is another principle that consultants typically use, that if they have to fill some space, if they apply the 1/3, 2/3 rule, or if they think in quarters, that they also think in tables and try to structure the content in very clear rows and in very clear columns. So that's what I really like. So there you can really illustrate this concept. But what I don't like is that this slide is very, very busy. So you have a lot of graphs, you have a lot of bars, you have a lot of text. And you know, what is good is that they use this darker green only for highlighting here the 71% and the 80%, because this makes it really easy to catch, you know, the important message here. But again, on the other side, you know, for those average percentages, they use another green. So I would have done it probably in a more decent gray, because, you know, this makes the slide just very busy. And what I really, 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 really don't like are those arrows here in the middle. I mean, why are they using the French colors, the French flag, to illustrate that? I mean, the purpose is that people understand, okay, they are talking about France, but I think it would have been much more elegant if you would just have put a France flag above the France column, and then use very, very decent arrows. Because to be honest, in my opinion, this makes the slide very busy. And this would be something where I would say, okay, this is a very unnecessary use of colors. It makes it just more busy, more complex. When I first looked at the slide, when I prepared for the video, I didn't really understand what those colors meant and what the purpose was. It took me a second look to really understand, okay, this is how they want to illustrate that we are talking about France. Yeah, but in my opinion, it's not a very good solution for building the slide. But nevertheless, and this is also the truth, not every table in not every slide in consulting is perfect. And I mean, even if you are or work with very experienced consultants, even I myself, not every slide looks good or looks perfect. Sometimes you just don't have the time to really, you know, finish it and put in the extra minutes to clean it up. Sometimes it is what it is, and as long as you still get your key message across, this is also okay. Then let's take a look at the next slide, and this slide I included in order to show how you usually can use visuals. So we had 3 slides with 3 graphs up front, and now we see the first kind of illustration. Okay, they show 3 circles because they want to talk about 3 dimensions of organization and company culture, and then they highlight the 3 most important aspects that they see. And this is something that you typically do in consulting. Such slide could be included in the main deck. In my opinion, it's a bit too empty because, I mean, if you actually hold a presentation and it's more about, you know, that you can talk about that and that people listen to what you're saying, then this would be fine, you know, to have those big images and just some headlines below that. But if this would be a real management presentation where you also would expect to send the slides afterwards to the client, or maybe, you know, to an audience that is not in the meeting, I would probably have included more text. So then I would have made those circles a bit smaller. I would have kept the headline, but then I would also probably would have to include, you know, some descriptive text that helps the audience to understand what you mean with that headlines, because it's very, very lean, and in my opinion a bit too lean. But nevertheless, you know, this is also something that you can have in consulting. And then last but not least, they close with the next steps and the implication. And of course, you know, this is a study, so of course they want to tell, okay, or give a recommendation what they should do. And they say, okay, we have 3 recommendations. CEOs need to act to become active AI players. They should learn from the one who are already on the top. then they don't ask for support. First, act yourself. Those are the 3 recommendations. And this is also something that you have in almost every consulting presentation, is that at the end you talk about next steps, that you talk about the implications, and what you typically try to do on the last slide is to summarize the what's the so what. Okay, this is a phrase that you use in consulting, and this basically means that you have to ask yourself, I mean, so what? So we showed the presentation, what's now? And this is what you typically answer in the last slide. So make it a habit that if you have a presentation, that you always close with a core message, with an implication, to give the audience, you know, a kind of a sense of what might come in the future, what they should do now, some call to action, maybe a positive message. So something that makes the presentation more round and again summarizes the so what. So what was the purpose of the presentation? Why was it important to go through that? And what are the implications for the audience? So that was my take on this BCG presentation. I think, you know, sometimes it helps to go through some of those presentations just to illustrate and get a feeling of, you know, how consulting slides look like. If this brought value, then please leave a thumb up and also hit the bell. If you have any comments or questions or some things that I didn't see but that you think are important, then please leave it in a comment. And with that being said, I wish you a very successful day. Hope to talk to you soon. Goodbye, Johannes.